There's a deep, almost primal rhythm to our discontent. We wake up, and before our feet even touch the floor, a current of worry can surge through us. Maybe it's a looming deadline at work, a lingering argument with a loved one, or just the sheer weight of the day stretching out, unknown and unformed. We carry these burdens like invisible stones, each one a testament to the mind's remarkable ability not just to experience life, but to weave it into layers of intricate suffering. Why is it so easy to fall into these patterns of distress? Why does peace feel so fleeting, so easily shattered by the smallest external event or the quietest internal rumination? It's as if our very minds are wired for a certain kind of ache, a willingness to wrestle with shadows long after the sun has risen. We replay conversations, dissect perceived slights, and fantasize about futures that might never come, all the while feeling the dull throb of dissatisfaction. This isn't about blame. It's a recognition of a fundamental human tendency, a pattern observed by the Buddha himself over 2 millennia ago. He saw that while life naturally presents challenges, it's our reaction to those challenges, our tendency to grasp and resist, that truly fuels the fires of suffering. Think about it when someone says something hurtful. The sting of the words is one thing, but the hours spent replaying it, imagining retorts, and feeling anger simmer, that's an entirely different level of pain. This inner churning, this constant mental commentary, is what Buddhist teachings often explore. We tell ourselves stories about what we are, what we have, and what we lack. These stories, when clung to, become the very fabric of our distress. We are like a bird that, instead of flying away from a storm, tries to build its nest amidst the wind and rain, only to have it torn apart again and again. The storm will pass, but the bird's attachment to its vulnerable nest ensures continued heartbreak. Consider the weight of regret. You might have made a decision years ago, a choice that, in hindsight, seems flawed. But the mind, in its relentless pursuit of certainty and control, keeps returning to that moment. It magnifies the mistake, conjures alternative paths, and insists that happiness could have been found elsewhere. This rehashing doesn't change the past, it only poisons the present. It creates suffering where there might have only been a lesson. And what about desire? We see something we want, a new possession, a different circumstance, a fleeting feeling, and our minds become fixated. The wanting itself can feel like a gnawing emptiness, and when the object of desire is absent, the void intensifies. Even if we obtain it, the satisfaction is often temporary, soon replaced by a new craving, a fresh longing. It's a cycle that seems designed to keep us perpetually chasing, perpetually unfulfilled. This tendency to suffer isn't a sign of weakness, it's simply how the untrained mind operates. It's the automatic pilot, the default setting. But the wisdom traditions, particularly Buddhism, offer a profound alternative. They don't suggest we become emotionless robots. Rather, they guide us toward understanding the mechanics of our own minds so we can break free from the cycle of unnecessary pain. The Buddha's teachings are not about denying reality or plastering over difficult emotions. They're about developing a clear-eyed understanding of how our inner landscape creates suffering, and how, by shifting our perspective, we can cultivate a profound and lasting peace. It's about seeing the game the mind is playing and choosing not to participate in its destructive loops. If we continue to explore these insights, we'll begin to see how our aversion to discomfort is itself a form of clinging, and how this clinging locks us into a cycle of distress. But before we delve into the specific ways we fuel our own suffering, it's important to acknowledge the power of these ingrained patterns. This isn't about adding more mental burden. It's about recognizing the burden we already carry and seeing that there's a way to set it down. And understanding how our internal reactions can amplify pain is just the beginning of this journey toward freedom. And before we dive deeper into these teachings, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Wisdom like this is easy to miss in the noise of life, but if this video found you, it was meant to. Now let's keep going. We experience a feeling, anger flares, sadness descends, anxiety tightens its grip. And almost instantly, our minds leap into action. We tell ourselves we shouldn't feel this way. We judge the emotion, criticize ourselves for having it, or immediately try to suppress it. We believe that because we feel something, we must act on it, or that the feeling itself is an indictment of our character. But what if our emotions aren't commands, but simply visitors passing through our inner landscape? Think about a wave in the ocean. It rises, crests, and then inevitably falls back into the sea. It doesn't demand that the ocean remain in a state of perpetual upheaval. It simply exists for a moment, an expression of the ocean's vastness before dissolving back into the whole. Our emotions can be like these waves. They arise due to causes and conditions, they are felt, and then, if we allow it, they recede. The trouble begins when we mistake the wave for the entire ocean, or worse, when we try to artificially hold the wave in place, or push another one away with all our might. This misinterpretation creates so much unnecessary suffering. When we feel fear, we might interpret it as a sign that we're in danger and need to escape. But often, the fear is rooted in a past experience or a projected future outcome that isn't actually present. The emotion arrives, and our mind immediately flags it as an emergency, demanding a response. We feel agitated, our heart races, and we spend a lot of energy trying to quell the feeling, often making it stronger in the process. Similarly, when resentment bubbles up after an interaction, we might feel an urge to lash out, to prove ourselves right, or to withdraw completely. The emotion feels like a powerful directive, telling us how we should behave. But the Buddha's teachings invite us to pause. What if this resentment is simply a signal, a message from our inner self about a perceived boundary crossed or an unmet expectation? It doesn't necessarily mean we need to engage in conflict or harbor bitterness. The very act of labeling an emotion as good or bad is often where we go wrong. We yearn for joy and contentment, and when they appear, we try to cling to them to make them permanent. But when anger or sadness arises, we recoil, wanting nothing to do with it. Both reactions, the clinging to the pleasant and the aversion to the unpleasant, are forms of resistance. They are attempts to control the natural flow of experience, and this control is an illusion. When we understand that emotions are not orders, a profound shift can begin. It's like realizing you don't have to obey every thought that pops into your head. Thoughts are just mental events, arising and passing away. So too are emotions. They are transient phenomena made of impermanence, just like everything else in existence. The only reason they gain such power over us is our insistence on interpreting them as absolute truths or urgent commands. Imagine a skilled gardener. They don't try to force flowers to bloom prematurely, nor do they wage war against weeds. They understand the natural cycles of growth and decay. They tend to the soil, provide what's needed, and allow nature to take its course. They don't get angry at the weeds for appearing. They see them as part of the landscape, something to be managed with awareness, not with fury. Our minds can learn to tend to our emotional landscape with similar wisdom. When sadness arises, instead of instantly trying to push it away with distractions or forced positivity, we can simply acknowledge its presence. Our sadness is here. What does it feel like in my body? Where is it located? This kind of gentle, non-judgmental observation disarms the emotion's power. It moves from being a commanding force to simply being a felt sensation, a wave passing through. This approach doesn't mean we become passive observers of our suffering. Rather, it's about responding wisely rather than reacting impulsively. It means recognizing that the urge to act on an emotion is not a command, but an impulse. And between the impulse and the action lies a crucial space of awareness, a space where we can choose a different path. The path of non-reaction is not about suppression, it's about non-identification. It's about seeing that the emotion is happening to you, or rather, within you, but it is not the totality of who you are. This distinction is incredibly liberating. It means the anger you feel today doesn't define you forever, and the joy you experienced yesterday doesn't require a frantic effort to recapture. This understanding of emotions as transient experiences rather than divine decrees lays the groundwork for truly managing our inner life. It helps us see that the fire of suffering isn't an external force, but something we often implicitly agree to fuel, simply by how we interpret and react to our inner states. And to understand how that fueling happens, we need to look at the ways we actively feed those flames, often without even realizing it. Imagine a tiny ember glowing in the darkness. It holds the potential for warmth, for light, for transformation. But if we were to constantly poke at it, add dry tinder, and blow on it with intensity, that ember would quickly become a raging inferno, consuming everything in its path. Our suffering often works in much the same way. It begins with a spark, a discomfort, a perceived wrong, and then we, with our reactions and attachments, become the fuel that turns it into a consuming fire. This is the essence of the Buddha's teaching on suffering. It's not just about the unpleasantness of an event itself, but about the secondary suffering we create by how we engage with it. The first arrow, as the saying goes, is the unavoidable pain of life, the stubbed toe, the harsh word, the loss of a loved one. The second arrow is the suffering we inflict upon ourselves through our resistance, our bitterness, our why me lamentations. We wound ourselves again and again with the very attempt to avoid or undo the first wound. Consider resentment. Someone says something that feels like an insult. The initial hurt is the first arrow. Then, the mind kicks into gear. It replays the scene, imagines clever retorts, rehearses arguments, and cultivates anger. Each replay, each imagined scenario, each surge of indignation is like adding another piece of wood to the fire. The initial sting, which might have been brief, is now stoked into hours, days, even years of simmering anger. The mind, caught in this loop, becomes a furnace of its own making. This is what it means to feed the flame. We feed the flame of suffering with our overthinking, our desire to be right, our need for things to be different than they are. We feed it with our clinging to the past, our fear of the future, and our inability to simply be present with what is. Every unskillful reaction, every moment of resistance, pours fuel onto the ember of unease, transforming it into a blazing inferno of distress. The Buddha used the metaphor of a burning house to illustrate this condition. We are living in a house that is inevitably going to burn down. Everything is impermanent, subject to change and decay. Yet, instead of seeking a way out, we are busy rearranging the furniture, arguing about the decor, and trying to extinguish the flames with buckets of water that only seem to spread the fire further. We are so caught up in the drama of the burning that we forget the urgency of escape. This isn't about becoming indifferent or emotionless. It's about recognizing that the burning is often exacerbated by our own actions. When we feel a surge of desire for something we don't have, that wanting is like a spark. If we immediately try to satisfy it, or if we lament its absence, we are fanning the flames. The craving itself can be painful, but the suffering comes from how we chase after it, or how we despair when it remains unfilled. Similarly, when pain arises, whether physical or emotional, our immediate instinct is often to push it away. This pushing away, this aversion, is a powerful form of fuel. We brace ourselves against the discomfort, we fight it, we desperately try to escape it. But this struggle against reality paradoxically entrenches us deeper in suffering. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The more you push, the more it resists, and the more energy it takes to keep it submerged. The profound insight here is that we are not helpless victims of our suffering. We are active participants in its creation through our habitual reactions. The fire is often the result of our own efforts to control or eliminate the discomfort, rather than allowing it to pass through us. The mind's tendency is to cling, to resist, to seek permanence in an impermanent world, and this is the very nature of the fuel we provide. So how do we stop feeding the fire? How do we extinguish the flames without denying the reality of heat and ash? It begins with the simple yet profound practice of awareness. It's about noticing the spark before it catches, recognizing the fuel before it's added. It's about seeing the second arrow in flight and choosing not to shoot ourselves with it. This involves understanding that the core of our suffering lies not in the experiences themselves, but in our habitual, reactive engagement with them. This realization that we are actively feeding the fire of our own suffering is not a cause for despair, but for incredible hope. It means that if we are the ones fueling it, we also possess the power to stop. And the key to that power lies in understanding how we cling, how we resist, and how, by doing so, we prevent ourselves from finding freedom. The next step in this journey is to recognize that the compulsion to hold on to things, even fleeting experiences, is at the root of this struggle. At the heart of so much human distress lies a fundamental misunderstanding, the belief that holding on brings security and happiness. We cling to memories, to people, to ideas, to possessions, even to our own sense of self. We grasp tightly, convinced that if we loosen our grip, we will lose something precious, or worse, we will cease to exist. This relentless clinging, however, is the very source of much of our suffering. Imagine trying to cup water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers, leaving you with less than before. Or picture trying to stop a river from flowing by blocking its path. The water will simply find new channels or build up pressure until it overflows. Clinging operates on a similar principle. The more desperately we try to hold on to something, the more we create an internal tension, a fear of loss, and ultimately, a greater sense of emptiness. The Buddha taught that all conditioned phenomena are impermanent. Everything changes. People grow and evolve, relationships shift, our bodies age, our fortunes turn, even our thoughts and feelings are in constant flux. Yet we attempt to arrest this natural flow. We try to freeze moments in time, to keep people as they were, to fix our circumstances in a state of perceived perfection. This is the essence of clinging, a resistance to the natural, undeniable truth of impermanence. When we cling to the past, we allow its shadows to darken our present. We replay old hurts, celebrate past glories, and lament what is no longer. This prevents us from truly inhabiting this moment. The past is gone, like a river that has already flowed downstream. Trying to hold on to it is like trying to drink from a dry riverbed. We also cling to people. We become so attached to certain individuals, so dependent on their presence or approval, that their absence or disapproval becomes a source of profound agony. We fear change in our relationships. We fear that the love will fade or that we will be abandoned. This fear itself corrodes the very bond we wish to preserve. It creates a fragile dependency rather than a resilient connection. Even our opinions and beliefs become objects of clinging. We often identify so strongly with our views that questioning them feels like a personal attack. We defend our positions fiercely, unwilling to entertain alternative perspectives, even if they might offer a broader understanding. This rigidity born of clinging shuts down growth and dialogue, creating an internal prison of certainty. This clinging is not always a conscious decision. It's often a deeply ingrained habit, a learned response to the perceived threat of change and loss. The mind instinctively seeks to maintain continuity, to avoid the discomfort of the unknown. But this instinct, left unchecked, becomes a primary driver of suffering. It's the fear of the falling leaf that prevents us from enjoying the beauty of the changing season. The teaching is not to become detached in a cold, unfeeling way. It's about understanding the difference between appreciating something and needing to possess it. It's about relating to life with an open hand rather than a clenched fist. An open hand can receive, it can touch gently, it can let go with grace. A clenched fist, while trying to hold on, often crushes what it seeks to keep. When we begin to notice our tendency to cling, we see its consequences clearly. We see the anxiety that arises from the fear of losing what we have, the bitterness that festers when things don't go our way, the sadness that engulfs us when circumstances inevitably change. This is the suffering that clinging breeds. It's a self-imposed hardship, a constant battle against the natural tide of existence. But there is a profound freedom that arises when we begin to question our need to hold on. It's the freedom to experience life as it unfolds, to love without the suffocating grip of possession, to be present without being haunted by the past or paralyzed by the future. This freedom isn't found in achieving some final state of non-attachment, but in the ongoing practice of recognizing when we are clinging and gently choosing to release our grip. This path of recognizing and loosening our grip is a fundamental aspect of Buddhist practice. It's about understanding that true peace doesn't come from solidifying things, but from allowing them to be fluid. And this fluid nature of existence points us towards another crucial realization, that the difficult moments we encounter are not permanent fixtures, but passing events. Life in its rawest form is a series of events, a dance of cause and effect, and within this dance, some steps are inevitably going to feel jarring. We will experience loss, disappointment, physical discomfort, and heartache. These are the unavoidable pains of existence, the first arrows that are shot into us by the sheer fact of being alive in an impermanent world. But the lingering ache, the chronic distress, the deep-seated misery, that is the suffering we choose. Think about a sudden rainstorm. The rain itself is unavoidable. We can't stop the clouds from releasing their water. That's the pain. We get wet, we might feel a chill, our plans might be disrupted. But then, some people might start to complain bitterly, lamenting the ruined picnic, wishing for sunshine with every fiber of their being, becoming consumed by anger at the sky. This added layer of internal turmoil, this resistance to the reality of the rain and the frustration it causes, that is the suffering. This distinction is crucial, and it's at the very core of Buddhist wisdom. The Buddha didn't promise a life free from pain, sorrow, or difficulty. Such a promise would be a delusion. Instead, he offered a path to freedom from suffering, a way to navigate the inevitable pains of life without allowing them to fester into a chronic condition of misery. He taught that while pain is an unavoidable guest, suffering is an unwelcome resident we invite in and then fail to evict. Our minds, however, are remarkably adept at inviting this unwelcome resident. When pain arises, our instinct is to resist it. We fight against the discomfort, we judge ourselves for experiencing it, we wish it would disappear immediately, and we get angry or frustrated if it doesn't. This resistance, this internal struggle against reality, is precisely what transforms temporary pain into prolonged suffering. We are like a person who, having stepped on a thorn, then continues to walk on that injured foot with all their weight, exacerbating the wound with every step. Consider the experience of aging. The physical changes, the inevitable decline in health, these are the first arrows of pain. But the suffering comes from our desperate attempts to deny aging, our regret for lost youth, our fear of becoming less vibrant, our resistance to the natural process of growing older. We cling ferociously to a past version of ourselves that no longer exists, creating a chasm between reality and our desires. Or think about a failed relationship. The heartbreak, the sense of loss, the loneliness, these are painful. But the suffering is amplified when we endlessly replay the arguments, dwell on what went wrong, judge ourselves or the other person harshly, and refuse to let go of the fantasy of how it should have been. We become imprisoned by our own internal narratives of loss and bitterness. The Buddha's teachings on the Four Noble Truths begin with the truth of suffering, dukkha. This isn't a pessimistic outlook, it's a clear-eyed diagnosis. We suffer because we are attached to things that are impermanent, and we resist the inevitable changes that life brings. But the crucial part of the diagnosis is the understanding that the cessation of suffering is possible. And this cessation comes about by understanding and ceasing the causes of suffering, primarily our grasping and aversion. When we practice mindfulness, when we cultivate awareness, we begin to see this dynamic at play within ourselves. We start to notice the moment the first arrow strikes, and then we observe our mind's reaction. Do we immediately brace for the second arrow, or do we allow the first to land, acknowledge its impact, and then let it begin to dissipate. This is the practice of non-resistance, the art of allowing life to be what it is, even when it's uncomfortable. This doesn't mean we become passive or apathetic. It means we respond to pain with wisdom rather than reactivity. It means recognizing that while we cannot control the arrival of pain, we have a profound influence over whether that pain transforms into suffering. We can choose not to fight the waves, but to learn how to surf them. We can accept the rain as part of the natural order and perhaps even find beauty in it without letting it dictate our entire emotional state. The freedom from suffering is not about escaping pain, but about transforming our relationship with it. It's about understanding that the discomfort is temporary, but our internal narrative about it can become a permanent cage. By letting go of the resistance, by accepting the impermanent nature of all experiences, we stop feeding the fire of our distress. We begin to see that the power to liberate ourselves from suffering doesn't lie in changing our external circumstances, but in changing our internal response. This understanding of pain versus suffering is a vital key. It unlocks the door to recognizing that our desires, our cravings, are not simple wants, but complex drivers that can expand endlessly, leading us further down the path of discontent if we are not mindful. Have you ever noticed how satisfying a particular craving can be, at least for a moment? That first sip of coffee on a sleepy morning, the relief of biting into a sweet treat when you're feeling low, the thrill of acquiring something you've longed for. For that fleeting instant, the craving is met, and a temporary calm descends. But this moment of satisfaction is often just a pause, a brief respite before the next, often larger, craving begins to stir. This is the nature of craving, or thirst, tanha in Buddhist terms. It's not just about simple desires. It's a deep, often insatiable longing that, if unchecked, only seems to grow larger and more demanding. The Buddha taught that craving is a primary cause of suffering, and it's a force that, by its very nature, multiplies. It's like trying to quench a fire by pouring gasoline on it. When we satisfy one craving, we often create the conditions for new ones to arise. We eat the sweet treat for comfort, but then we might feel guilty about the sugar, leading to a craving for health foods. We buy the new gadget we desired, but soon we're eyeing the next model or a different accessory. We achieve a goal, feel a temporary sense of accomplishment, and then our minds are already casting about for the next mountain to climb. This relentless cycle of wanting and seeking is like a treadmill. We can run and run, expending vast amounts of energy, but we never actually reach a destination of lasting contentment. The treadmill of craving is fueled by the belief that fulfillment lies out there, in the next acquisition, the next experience, the next achievement. And because these external things are impermanent, the satisfaction they offer is always temporary, always fleeting, inevitably leading to the arising of a new longing. This multiplication of craving isn't just about material possessions or sensory pleasures. It extends to our emotional and psychological states. We crave happiness and try to hold on to it. We crave peace and try to avoid anything that disturbs us. We crave recognition and seek validation. When we don't get what we crave, we suffer. Even when we do get it, the satisfaction is often short-lived, and we begin craving the next good feeling or fearing the loss of the current one. The Buddha even spoke of the craving for non-existence, where deep despair leads to a wish for everything to end, for life itself to cease. This is the extreme end of the spectrum, but it illustrates how pervasive and powerful craving can be as a driving force behind our experience. It's the engine that keeps the wheel of suffering turning. What makes craving so insidious is that it often disguises itself. It can masquerade as ambition, as a desire for improvement, as a healthy pursuit of happiness. We are encouraged by society to want more, to always strive for the next level, to never be content with what we have. And so, we embrace craving as a virtue, unaware of how it is deeply entangled with our suffering. When we begin to observe our own minds, we start to see these patterns clearly. We notice the subtle shift from satisfaction to a new wanting. We see how a moment of ease gives way to a desire for more ease or a fear of its loss. We understand that the happy place we so desperately seek is often imagined as a state of perpetual satisfaction, a state that is fundamentally at odds with the dynamic nature of life. The teaching isn't to eradicate all desire. It's to understand the nature of craving and to disarm its power. It's about recognizing that the relentless pursuit of more, the addiction to satisfaction, is a treadmill that leads only to exhaustion and dissatisfaction. It's like a thirsty person who, instead of drinking pure water, keeps asking for stronger and stronger drinks, each one only intensifying their thirst in the long run. By understanding how craving multiplies, we begin to see the futility of trying to find lasting happiness by simply accumulating more experiences or possessions. True peace is not found in fulfilling every whim, but in understanding the craving impulse itself and learning to loosen its grip. This often leads us to a crucial realization: that our aversion to unpleasantness is simply another, more aggressive form of this same clinging. We often think of attachment as wanting things to be good, to be pleasant, to be ours. We crave pleasure, we cling to happiness, we hold on to what we love. But what about the flip side? What about our intense dislike of pain, our aversion to discomfort, our urge to push away what we find unpleasant? Isn't that simply the opposite of attachment? Not according to the Buddha. In the intricate tapestry of human suffering, aversion is just another thread of attachment, a desperate attempt to control our experience by rejecting what we don't want. Think about it: when you feel a strong aversion to something, a person, a situation, a feeling, how much energy do you expend trying to avoid it, to push it away, to mentally distance yourself from it? This intense focus, this constant vigilance against the unwelcome, is a powerful form of engagement. It's like trying to hold a beach ball submerged in water. The more you push down, the more force you exert, and the more the ball is determined to bob back up. Your aversion is the force you're exerting, and the unpleasant thing is the ball. This aversion is fundamentally a form of rejection. We are attached, in our minds, to a certain state of affairs, a state that excludes the unpleasant. We want things to be other than they are. We are attached to the idea of comfort, of ease, of pleasure, and we are vehemently opposed to anything that threatens that projected state. This opposition, this clinging to an imagined perfect reality, is the root of the suffering caused by aversion. When we feel anger, it's often a manifestation of aversion. We are angry at something or someone, pushing them away from our desired state of peace. When we feel disgust, it's a visceral rejection of something we find offensive. When we feel fear or anxiety, it's an aversion to potential future discomfort or danger. In each case, the mind is desperately trying to impose its will on reality, to create a world that aligns with its preferences and to banish anything that doesn't. This is why the Buddha taught that the root of suffering is not just craving, but also aversion. They are two sides of the same coin, both stemming from a fundamental ignorance of the impermanent and interdependent nature of reality. We are attached to pleasant experiences, wanting them to continue indefinitely, and we are averse to unpleasant experiences, wanting them to disappear instantly. Both impulses create a resistance to what is, and it is this resistance that generates suffering. Consider the pain of physical injury. The initial pain is the first arrow, unavoidable, but then comes the second arrow. Grumbling, complaining, wishing it wasn't so, feeling sorry for ourselves, becoming irritable with everyone around us. This reaction of aversion to our pain creates a cloud of suffering that is often far more debilitating than the physical discomfort itself. We are attached to being pain-free, and our aversion to the current pain is a direct consequence of that attachment. The teaching on non-aversion, therefore, is not about liking pain or discomfort. It's about recognizing that these experiences are part of the tapestry of life, and that our fierce rejection of them only binds us more tightly to their grip. When we stop fighting against the unpleasant, when we learn to simply let it be, to observe it without judgment, something remarkable happens. The intensity often diminishes, and the suffering that we've layered on top begins to peel away. It's like learning to swim in rough seas. Instead of fighting the waves and exhausting yourself, you learn to move with them, to use their energy rather than be overcome by them. You are still aware of the rough water, but you are no longer in a desperate struggle against it. Your aversion has softened into acceptance. This realization that aversion is a form of attachment can be deeply challenging to our ingrained habits. We feel justified in our dislike, in our outrage, in our fear. We believe that by recoiling from the unpleasant, we are protecting ourselves. But in reality, we are often trapping ourselves in a cycle of reactivity, constantly scanning our environment for threats and expending immense mental and emotional energy holding the unwelcome at bay. The path forward lies in understanding that both craving and aversion arise from the same root, a desire to control our experience and a failure to embrace the impermanent, often unpredictable nature of existence. When we loosen our grip on what we want and soften our resistance to what we don't want, we begin to free ourselves from the tyranny of these dual impulses. This opens the door to a more profound insight into the nature of our inner world, particularly how we perceive the solidity of ourselves. We wake up each morning and without even thinking about it, we proclaim, "I am." We identify with our thoughts, our feelings, our bodies, our roles, our possessions, our memories. We have a name, a history, a set of beliefs, all of which contribute to a strong, persistent sense of self. This feeling of being a solid, independent, enduring entity is one of the most powerful illusions we experience, and it is a primary source of our suffering. The Buddha taught the doctrine of anatta, often translated as no self or non-self. This doesn't mean we don't exist. It means that there is no permanent, unchanging, independent I at the core of our being. Instead, what we commonly perceive as self is a constantly changing aggregate of physical and mental phenomena, form, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. These are like the components of a chariot. The chariot is a name we give to the collection of wheels, axle, reins, and frame, but if you break it down into its individual parts, you can't find the chariot anywhere. This concept can be incredibly disorienting at first. We feel so undeniably real, so distinctly separate from everything else. Yet, when we examine ourselves honestly, we find that everything about us is in flux. Our bodies are constantly changing, cells dying and regenerating. Our thoughts arise and disappear in an instant. Our feelings come and go, our beliefs evolve, our relationships shift. If every single component of what we call me is impermanent, then where is this solid, unchanging self? The illusion of a solid self arises from our habit of clinging. We cling to our memories, creating a narrative of who we are. We cling to our physical form, identifying with our appearance. We cling to our opinions, seeing them as fundamental truths about ourselves. This clinging is like drawing a line in the sand. The tide will inevitably come in and wash it away, but we keep redrawing it, desperately trying to maintain a fixed boundary. When we believe we are a solid, separate self, we naturally become concerned with its survival, its protection, its aggrandizement. This leads to all sorts of problems: selfishness, greed, envy, pride, defensiveness, and fear of death. If I am a distinct entity, then my needs must come first. If I am my opinions, then anyone who disagrees is an enemy. If I am my body, then aging and illness are existential threats. Consider the experience of anger. When we become angry, we often say, "I am angry." But is the anger us, or is it something that is arising within the field of our awareness? If we can observe the anger without immediately identifying with it, we can see it as a passing phenomenon, a chemical and energetic reaction. The suffering comes when we say, "This anger is me. This anger is who I am. This anger must be expressed." The teaching of non-self is not a nihilistic idea. It's profoundly liberating. If there is no fixed, solid self to protect, then all the anxiety, fear, and defensiveness associated with it begins to dissolve. If I am not a static entity, then judgment and blame lose their power. If I am not separate, then compassion for others arises naturally, as they too are part of this same impermanent flow. This understanding encourages us to see ourselves not as isolated islands, but as interconnected parts of a larger whole. It's like realizing you are not just a single water molecule, but part of the ocean. The ocean has its own movements, its own currents, its own vastness, but you are not fundamentally separate from it. Recognizing the impermanent and composite nature of the self is a gradual process, a deep insight that unfolds with continued practice and reflection. It's a journey that helps us dismantle the walls we've built around ourselves, walls that create division and isolation, and ultimately suffering. When we see that the self is not a solid fortress, but a flowing river, we begin to understand how letting go of the need for control can lead to true freedom. This insight into the fluid nature of the self paves the way for a deeper understanding of impermanence itself, revealing that nothing, not even our perceived core identity, remains constant. The world around us and the world within us are in perpetual motion. The seasons turn, the stars traverse the heavens, the tides ebb and flow. In our own bodies, cells are born and die. In our minds, thoughts flicker like fireflies. Yet we yearn for permanence. We build monuments, pursue lasting fame, and desperately grasp onto moments of happiness, as if we could somehow freeze them forever. But the fundamental truth that underpins all existence is that nothing lasts. This is the teaching of impermanence, known as anicca in Pali. It's not a grim prediction of doom, but a neutral observation of reality. Everything that has a beginning has an end. Everything that is compounded will eventually decompose. Everything that rises will fall. To deny this is to live in a dream that inevitably shatters when confronted with the unyielding nature of change. When we resist this truth, we suffer. We grieve losses intensely, not just because of the absence of what we loved, but because we cannot accept that it is gone. We cling to youth, fearing the inevitable march of time. We become anxious about the future, dreading inevitable changes. We try to solidify our relationships, our careers, our identities, as if they could become permanent bastions against the flow of time. Imagine holding a delicate flower. Its beauty is exquisite, its fragrance intoxicating. We want to keep it that way forever, but the petals will eventually wither, the color will fade, and it will return to the earth. The suffering comes not from the flower's wilting, but from our refusal to accept its transient nature. We wanted an eternal blossom, and when it becomes what it naturally must, we are heartbroken. The Buddha said that grasping at impermanent things and wishing them to be permanent is like trying to scoop water with a sieve. The effort is futile, and the result is only frustration. Our attempts to hold onto moments of joy, to keep people as they are, to maintain a status quo, are all fundamentally attempts to stop the river of time. But consider the flip side of this teaching. If nothing lasts, then that means our pain also does not last. Our struggles are temporary. Our difficult emotions will eventually pass. The problems that loom so large today will, in time, become distant memories. This is where impermanence offers not just a truth, but a profound source of freedom. If we can truly embrace the fact that everything changes, then we can loosen our grip on what causes us pain. We can face difficult situations with less dread, knowing that they too will pass. We can experience happiness with greater appreciation, understanding that its transient nature makes it all the more precious. We can relate to others with more understanding and compassion, recognizing that they too are subject to the same winds of change. This doesn't mean we become indifferent or passive. It means we engage with life more fully, more presently, and with less fear. It means that when the storm comes, we don't rage against the sky, but we learn to navigate it, knowing that the sun will eventually shine again. It means that when joy arrives, we savor it, appreciating its beauty for its fleeting moment, without the anxious thought of needing it to stay. The freedom that comes from accepting impermanence is the freedom from the constant anxiety of loss. It's the liberation from the struggle against reality. It's the profound peace that arises when we stop trying to build sandcastles against the tide and instead find joy in the dance of the waves. This understanding of impermanence is not just about external events. It applies just as powerfully to our inner world, to our thoughts and emotions. And when we see that even these internal states are constantly shifting, we begin to realize that we don't have to cling to them or fight them, but can simply allow them to pass. This leads us to the present moment, a place often overlooked in our constant pursuit of other things. We spend so much of our lives either replaying the past or anticipating the future. Our minds are like restless travelers, constantly journeying away from where we actually are. We carry the weight of yesterday's regrets and the anxieties of tomorrow's possibilities, often missing the only reality we truly inhabit. The present moment. But this present moment, the only place where life is actually happening, is often misunderstood. It's not a demand, a problem to be solved, or a stage for our performance. It is, in its most fundamental essence, simply presence. Think about a candle flame. It exists only in this instant. The flame of a moment ago is gone, and the flame of the next moment has not yet ignited. The flame doesn't demand that you become a perfect dancer or a master poet. It simply burns, a testament to the present moment. Similarly, the present moment doesn't require you to be anything other than what you are right now. It doesn't ask for your achievements, your accolades, or your approval. It simply is. Our suffering often arises from our inability to meet the present moment as it is. We judge it. This is boring, this is painful, this should be different. We try to escape it through distractions or to reshape it into our ideal. We are so busy wrestling with the present, trying to force it into a mold created by past desires or future fears, that we miss its inherent simplicity and its profound peace. The Buddha taught that the present moment is the only time we have any power. The past is gone, and the future is yet to come. All our actions, our choices, our growth must take place right now. Yet we often treat the present moment as a mere stepping stone to something else, a waiting room for happiness, a trial to be endured until a better time arrives. This constant mental traveling away from the present creates a deep sense of unease. We feel disconnected, restless, and unfulfilled. We might achieve great things, amass wealth, or be surrounded by people, but if we are not truly present, we miss the richness of the experience. The taste of the food, the warmth of a loved one's hand, the beauty of a sunset, all are experienced dully, as if through a fog, because our minds are elsewhere. When we learn to bring our attention back to the present moment, to simply be here, fully aware, we discover something remarkable. The present moment doesn't judge us, it doesn't criticize, it doesn't demand perfection, it simply offers itself, moment by moment, as a space to breathe, to feel, to observe. It's a space of open potential, not a problem to be solved. Consider the simple act of breathing. The breath is always happening in the present. It doesn't demand that you breathe perfectly or deeply or rhythmically. It just flows in and out, continuously, effortlessly. When we connect with our breath, we connect with the present moment. We anchor ourselves in the here and now, and the mental chatter about past and future begins to quiet down. This isn't about forcing ourselves to be present. It's about gently returning our attention, again and again, whenever we notice our minds have wandered. It's a practice of kindness and patience with ourselves. Each time we notice we've drifted away, that's a moment of awareness, a success. And each time we gently bring ourselves back to the breath, to the sensations in our body, to the sounds around us, we are choosing presence over dwelling. The present moment, when met fully, is not a source of stress. It is a source of peace. It's a space where we can experience life directly without the filters of our own expectations and judgments. It's a place where we are not asked to be anything other than who we are, unfolding in this very instant. And realizing this can be a profound relief, a quiet homecoming. Understanding that the present moment asks nothing of us reveals that our perceived needs and desires are often transient thought forms, not essential truths about ourselves, and that these thoughts, while powerful, are not the entirety of our being. In the constant stream of our inner lives, thoughts arise like clouds in the sky. They appear, drift across the mental landscape, and eventually dissipate. Yet, we so often mistakenly identify ourselves with these passing formations. We believe that because a thought arises, it must be true, it must be important, and more importantly, it must be us. This identification with our thoughts is a profound source of delusion and suffering. When a thought pops into your head, perhaps a critical judgment about yourself, a worry about the future, or a memory from the past, what is your immediate reaction? Do you unquestioningly accept it as an accurate depiction of reality? Do you believe it represents your true essence? For many of us, the answer is a resounding yes. We feel a thought, and we immediately assume it's a direct representation of who we are, what we believe, or what will happen. This is like a person standing by a river and believing that every piece of debris that floats by is a part of them. The log is me, the plastic bottle is me, the leaf is me. And when these pieces of debris are unsightly or unpleasant, they feel a deep sense of distress. But the river, with all its floating contents, is not the person. The person is the observer standing on the bank. The Buddha taught that thoughts are like visitors. They arrive, they might stay for a while, they might speak to us, but they are not our landlords. We don't have to offer them permanent residence or believe everything they tell us. They are phenomena that arise and pass away, conditioned by a myriad of factors. The suffering comes from treating them as immutable truths or as essential components of our identity. When we believe I am my thoughts, we become prisoners of our own minds. We get caught in loops of worry, self-criticism, and rumination. A negative thought arises, and we identify with it, amplifying it, believing it to be an accurate reflection of our worth. I'm not good enough. If we believe this thought, it shapes our feelings, our actions, and our perception of ourselves. The suffering isn't inherent in the thought itself, but in our identification with it. The practice of mindfulness is a powerful tool for dismantling this identification. It teaches us to observe our thoughts without judgment, without believing them, and without getting carried away by them. We learn to see them as mental events, fleeting phenomena that arise and pass. We train ourselves to notice the thought, acknowledge its presence with a gentle mental nod, and then let it go, like watching a cloud drift across the vast expanse of the sky. This doesn't mean we suppress our thoughts or try to stop them from arising. That would be like trying to stop the waves in the ocean. Instead, it's about developing a different relationship with our thoughts. It's about creating space between ourselves and our thinking mind. It's about realizing that we are the awareness in which thoughts arise, not the thoughts themselves. This shift in perspective is profoundly liberating. When we are not identified with every thought that passes through our minds, we are no longer at the mercy of our own mental chatter. We can observe the negative thoughts without being consumed by them. We can acknowledge the anxious thoughts without letting them dictate our actions. We can see the seductive thoughts of desire without being swept away by them. It is the clinging to our thoughts, believing them to be the ultimate reality of who we are, that causes so much of our internal turmoil. When we loosen that clinging, when we recognize that we are the awareness witnessing the thoughts, not the thoughts themselves, we begin to find a profound inner stillness, an unshakable peace that is not dependent on our mental content. This realization that we are not our thoughts opens up a new understanding of our impulses and urges, revealing that these too are not mandates that must be obeyed. We are creatures of impulse. From the moment we wake, urges begin to nag at us. The urge to hit snooze, the urge for coffee, the urge to check our phones, the urge to lash out when provoked, the urge to comfort ourselves with food when feeling down. These impulses are powerful, insistent, and can feel like commands, but the wisdom of the Dharma reveals a crucial truth. An urge is not an order. These urges are simply mental and physical phenomena arising due to causes and conditions. They are electrochemical signals fired in the brain, muscle twitches, hormonal shifts. They point towards what the mind or body momentarily desires, fears, or craves, but the critical point is that they do not compel us to act. Between the arising of an urge and its subsequent action, there exists a space, a crucial interval where freedom resides. Think about a powerful urge to smoke a cigarette for someone trying to quit. The urge arises with a jolt, a physical craving, a mental script playing out in their head about the relief it will bring. It demands attention, it screams for satisfaction. But the person who has trained themselves to see this urge as simply an urge and not an unbreakable command can acknowledge it. The urge to smoke is here. It feels strong. Then they can choose not to act on it. They can let it pass without feeding it with the action of smoking. This is the essence of intentional action versus reactive behavior. Reactivity is acting out of sheer impulse, without conscious consideration. Intentional action involves a pause, an awareness, a choice. It's the difference between being a leaf blown helplessly by the wind and a sailor who can read the wind and adjust their sails. The Buddha himself experienced urges. He felt hunger, thirst, fatigue, desire. But his practice was to observe these urges without becoming enslaved by them. He understood that acting impulsively on every urge would lead him further into the cycle of suffering, driven by craving and aversion. Our modern world, with its constant stimulation and instant gratification, makes it even harder to distinguish between an urge and an order. Advertisements tell us we need things, social media feeds us constant stimuli, and our phones buzz with notifications, all designed to trigger immediate responses and fulfill fleeting desires. This environment trains us to be reactive, to act first and think later, or often not at all. Recognizing that urges are not commands is a powerful step towards self-mastery. It means understanding that we are not simply puppets controlled by our biological and psychological impulses. We have the capacity for conscious choice. That urge to check your phone for the 10th time in an hour, it's just an urge. You can notice it, choose not to obey it, and return your attention to what you were doing. That urge to eat something unhealthy when you're stressed, it's just an urge. You can acknowledge it and choose a different coping mechanism, like a short walk or a few deep breaths. This practice requires patience and consistent effort. It's about developing the self-awareness to recognize an urge as it arises and the willpower to create that space for conscious decision-making. It's about understanding that fulfilling every urge doesn't lead to happiness, but often leads to regret, to addiction, and to a further entanglement in the web of desire. When we train ourselves to not blindly obey urges, we begin to cultivate a profound sense of inner freedom. We realize that we are not slaves to our impulses. This understanding is not about suppressing our natural inclinations, nor is it about becoming robotic. Instead, it's about living with intention, choosing our actions wisely, and thereby reducing the amount of unnecessary suffering we create for ourselves and others. This ability to choose our response rather than simply react is deeply connected to the concept of non-resistance, which is often misunderstood as passivity rather than a profound strength. There's a common misconception that the Buddhist path, with its emphasis on acceptance and letting go, is a path of passivity, of giving up, of weakness. When faced with injustice, with suffering, with a difficult situation, the instinct is often to fight, to resist, to assert one's will. The idea of non-resistance can sound like apathy, like allowing oneself to be a doormat. But this interpretation misses the profound strength and active engagement inherent in true non-resistance. Non-resistance, in the Buddhist sense, is not about surrendering to hardship or condoning wrongdoing. It's about releasing the internal struggle against reality. It's about recognizing what is happening, accepting its presence in this moment, without adding layers of mental and emotional resistance, judgment, and clamoring for it to be different. This is not weakness, It is a powerful form of discernment and skillful action. Think about a strong river current. If you try to swim directly against it, you will exhaust yourself and make little progress. You are resisting the undeniable force of the water. But if you can learn to move with the current, to use its energy, to navigate its flow, you can move downstream effectively, perhaps even reaching your destination with greater ease and less struggle. Non-resistance is like learning to navigate the current of life. When we resist reality, we create suffering. We become entangled in frustration, anger, and despair because things are not as we wish them to be. This resistance is an exhausting internal battle. It drains our energy and clouds our judgment, making us less effective at dealing with the situation at hand. Non-resistance, on the other hand, liberates that energy. By accepting the present reality, even if it is painful or unpleasant, we open up space for clear seeing and wise action. Consider a situation where someone has been wronged. The immediate impulse might be to retaliate, to fight back with fury. This is resistance. But non-resistance would involve acknowledging the pain and injustice without the added layer of burning anger and desire for revenge. It means seeing the situation clearly for what it is, understanding the dynamics at play, and then choosing how to respond from a place of grounded wisdom rather than reactive anger. This response might still be firm, it might involve setting boundaries, but it will come from a place of inner strength, not from the shaky ground of resistance. The great strength of non-resistance lies in its ability to preserve our inner peace and clarity. When we are not expending enormous energy fighting against what is, we are free to engage with what needs to be done with a calm, focused mind. This allows for more skillful, compassionate, and effective action. It's like a skilled martial artist who uses their opponent's energy against them, rather than meeting force with brute force. This wisdom also extends to our inner lives. When we resist difficult emotions, when we fight against the experience of sadness or anxiety, we often amplify them. Non-resistance in this context means acknowledging the emotion, allowing it to be present, observing its sensations without judgment, and understanding that it too is impermanent. This acceptance doesn't mean we passively endure them forever. It creates the fertile ground from which they can naturally dissolve. The strength of non-resistance is not in inaction, but in the absence of internal struggle. It is the power that comes from aligning ourselves with the flow of reality, rather than fighting against it. It is the profound courage it takes to face things as they are, without the comforting, yet ultimately debilitating, shield of denial or perpetual opposition. This wisdom of not fighting against reality cultivates a deep capacity for stillness, and this stillness is the foundation for mindfulness, a practice that can literally rewire our brains and change our habitual reactions. In our fast-paced world, reactions often happen in a blink of an eye. A perceived slight, a sudden fear, a tempting advertisement. Before we can even register what's happening, our minds and bodies have already responded. This reactivity can feel like a force of nature, an automatic pilot that steers us through life, often leading us down familiar paths of discomfort and regret. But there is a way to interrupt this automatic pilot. By cultivating a deliberate practice of delay, mindfulness, at its core, is about paying attention, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. But to truly harness its power, to rewire the brain's habitual pathways, we need to introduce a crucial pause. This pause, this deliberate delay between stimulus and response, is where true freedom begins. It's the space where awareness can step in and gently guide our choices. Think about the classic urge to check your phone every time it buzzes. The buzz is the stimulus. The conditioned response is to immediately grab it. But if we practice mindfulness, we can learn to cultivate a small delay. When the phone buzzes, instead of instantly reaching for it, we can take a breath. We can notice the urge to check arise, acknowledge it, and then choose whether or not to pick up the phone. This small pause, this conscious delay, breaks the automatic chain of reaction. This practice of delay is not about suppressing urges or emotions. It's about gaining mastery over them. It's about recognizing that while we may not always control what arises in our minds and bodies, we certainly have a say in how we respond to it. The delay provides the critical window for that choice to be made, not out of impulse, but out of intention and awareness. For someone struggling with addiction, this delay can be life-saving. When the craving hits, the automatic response might be to give in. But by practicing mindfulness and inserting a delay, perhaps repeating a mantra, doing a few deep breaths, or focusing on the physical sensations of the urge without acting on them, they can weaken the automatic connection between craving and action. They are literally rewiring their brain's response patterns. This rewiring is not just about avoiding negative behaviors, it's also about cultivating positive ones. When we experience a moment of kindness or beauty or connection, our tendency might be to quickly move on to the next thing. But by intentionally delaying, by savoring that positive experience, we deepen its impact, allowing it to have a more profound and lasting effect on our well-being. The practice of delay is essentially the practice of intentionality. It's about moving from a life lived on autopilot to a life lived with conscious direction. It's about recognizing that our habitual reactions are learned patterns, and just as they were learned, they can be unlearned and replaced with more skillful responses. This is the true power of mindfulness, not just to observe, but to actively reshape our inner landscape. By consciously delaying our responses, we are not suppressing our natural inclinations, but rather developing a profound capacity to steer our own course, moving from reactivity towards a more deliberate and peaceful engagement with life, which leads to a deeper understanding of what it truly means to let go. The phrase "letting go" can conjure images of surrender, of defeat, of walking away from a fight. But in the context of Buddhist wisdom, letting go is not about resignation, it is about liberation. It is the active, courageous decision to release our grip on things that no longer serve us, things that cause us pain, or things that are simply beyond our control. It is an act of profound strength, not weakness. We often hold onto things out of fear. We fear the emptiness that might follow if we release a relationship, albeit a painful one. We fear the uncertainty that might arise if we let go of a job that drains us. We fear the discomfort that might come with releasing our grip on past hurts or grievances. This clinging, this refusal to let go, is the primary source of our suffering when it comes to difficult experiences. Letting go isn't about wishing things were different. It's about accepting that they are as they are in this moment and realizing that holding onto them tightly is only causing further pain. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack full of stones. You can keep adding stones, convinced you need them, but at some point the weight becomes unbearable. Letting go is the act of gently opening that backpack and allowing the stones to fall away one by one. This process requires discernment. We must learn to recognize what no longer serves us. Is this resentment helping me? Is this fear preventing me from living fully? Is this attachment to an outcome creating unnecessary anxiety? When we see clearly that an object of our clinging is a source of suffering, the act of letting go becomes not a defeat, but a necessary and liberating step. The Buddha taught that attachment is the root of suffering. Therefore, letting go of attachment is the path to its cessation. This doesn't mean becoming emotionless or unfeeling. It means no longer being defined or imprisoned by our attachments. It means we can experience love without possessiveness, joy without clinging to its perpetuation, and sorrow without being permanently drowned by it. Consider the practice of forgiveness. Holding onto anger towards someone who has hurt us is a heavy burden to carry. It keeps us tethered to the past event and the person who caused the pain. Forgiveness, in this context, is a form of letting go. It's not about condoning the action or forgetting the hurt, but about releasing the destructive grip of resentment. It frees us, the ones who are carrying the burden of anger, enabling us to move forward with greater peace. Letting go also applies to our mental states. We often cling to negative thoughts and emotions, believing they are essential to our identity or the only way to navigate the world. When an anxious thought arises, instead of accepting it as a fact about ourselves and allowing it to dictate our actions, we can acknowledge it and then let it pass, like a cloud drifting across the sky. This is not giving up on finding peace. It is actively creating the conditions for peace to arise. This practice of letting go is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process. It's a muscle that grows stronger with use. Each time we choose to release something that binds us, we gain a little more freedom, a little more spaciousness, and a little more peace. And as we practice this active release, we begin to discover a deeper, more stable form of peace that is not dependent on our circumstances, but on our inner state. This cultivated inner state, this release from clinging and resistance, eventually leads to a profound stillness, a quiet space where we can encounter what remains when all the striving and holding finally ceases. In the ceaseless flow of existence, where everything is in constant flux, where seasons change, bodies age, and emotions rise and fall, we often feel a sense of instability, a lack of solid ground. We grasp for permanence, for something fixed and unchanging to anchor ourselves, but the more we grasp, the more we are pulled into the restless currents of impermanence. True stillness, however, doesn't come from holding on to something. It comes from letting go, and in that letting go, a remarkable discovery awaits. When we bring our minds to rest, not through suppression, but through a gentle, sustained awareness, often cultivated through practices like meditation and mindfulness, we begin to notice something profound. Amongst the transient phenomena of our experience, there is an underlying quality, a witness, a space of pure awareness that remains constant. It is not separate from the changing phenomena, yet it is not touched by them. Think of a candle flame again. The flame itself is constantly flickering, changing, consuming wax. It is inherently impermanent, but the space in which the flame burns, the air around it, does not change in its fundamental nature. Or consider the sky. Clouds, storms, and sunlight all pass across it, altering its appearance moment by moment. But the sky itself, the vast expanse of blue, remains. This is akin to the unchanging nature that can be revealed through stillness. This unchanging aspect is not a thing to be found or a state to be achieved and then held onto. It is more like a recognition, an unveiling. When we quiet the restless chatter of the mind, when we release the grip of our desires and aversions, when we stop fighting against reality, the usual noise of our internal world begins to subside. And in that profound quiet, we begin to perceive the unchanging nature of pure awareness, the background against which all experience plays out. This stillness is not barren or empty. It is full, vibrant, and inherently peaceful. It is the ground of our being, the place from which all perception arises, and yet it is untouched by the content of that perception. When we identify with our thoughts, emotions, and sensations, we mistake the transient ripples on the surface for the ocean itself. Stillness allows us to delve deeper, to experience the vast, unwavering ocean beneath. This recognition of an unchanging ground within ourselves is profoundly liberating. It is the ultimate antidote to the fear of change and loss. If there is a part of us that is not subject to decay, not vulnerable to the whims of circumstance, then the anxieties that plague us begin to lose their power. We realize that our core being is not at stake, even when everything around us is shifting. This is not an intellectual concept to be grasped, but an experiential truth to be uncovered. It requires consistent practice and a willingness to be present with whatever arises in the mind, without judgment or attachment. The more we practice letting go and observing with gentle awareness, the more the veil of impermanence lifts, revealing the steady presence that has always been there. This profound discovery of an unchanging peace, accessible through stillness, transforms our understanding of freedom. It helps us see that freedom is not the absence of challenges, but the presence of an inner sanctuary that remains untouched by them. And this sanctuary is not a destination, but a way of being that must be continuously practiced. We often chase freedom as if it were a destination, a place we arrive at when all our struggles are over, when all our desires are met, or when we finally achieve a constant state of blissful peace. We imagine freedom as a feeling of euphoria, a permanent absence of discomfort, a final victory over our inner demons. But if there's one thing the path of wisdom teaches, it's that freedom is not a resting place, but a constant, dynamic practice. The moment we think we've achieved freedom, we have likely fallen into a new form of clinging, the clinging to a particular state of feeling or being. Freedom, in the Buddhist sense, is the continuous process of letting go, of observing the arising and passing of all phenomena, external circumstances, internal thoughts, emotions, and even the sense of peace itself, without attachment. It is the ongoing dismantling of the walls we build around ourselves, not the discovery of a castle already built. If freedom were a feeling, then it would be subject to the same laws of impermanence that govern everything else. The blissful feeling would inevitably fade, replaced by other sensations, other thoughts, other challenges, and then we would feel frustrated, believing we had lost our freedom. This is why the Buddha emphasized practice, the continuous cultivation of awareness, wisdom, and compassion. The practice of mindfulness, for instance, is not about achieving a state of perpetual calm. It's about consistently returning our attention to the present moment, again and again, whenever we notice our minds have wandered. Each return, each conscious redirection of attention is an act of freedom. Each time we choose awareness over automatic reaction, we are practicing freedom. Similarly, the practice of letting go is not a one-time event. We let go of a grievance only to find new attachments arising. We release a desired outcome only to find a new aspiration taking root. The practice of letting go means consistently recognizing these new instances of clinging and choosing to release them, not with resignation, but with a clear intention to be unburdened. This understanding shifts our focus from seeking a perfect, unchanging state to embracing the process of growth and transformation. True freedom is found not in the absence of challenges, but in our capacity to navigate them with wisdom, equanimity, and a heart that is increasingly unburdened by the need to control or possess. It is the freedom that comes from knowing how to respond skillfully to whatever life presents. It's like learning to swim. You don't achieve swimming once and then you're done. You practice, you refine your strokes, you learn to adapt to different waters. Similarly, freedom is the ongoing skill of navigating life's waters with grace, awareness, and a continuous release of what weighs us down. It is found in the daily commitment to these practices, not in a final proclamation of victory. This continuous practice is the path that leads us back to the source of our own suffering, and in that understanding, we find the ultimate key to extinguishing the flames that consume us. We began by exploring the deep-seated ways our minds are drawn to discontent, how we inadvertently fan the embers of suffering into raging infernos. We've looked at how our reactions to pain, our cravings, our aversions, our identification with a fixed sense of self, and our clinging to the impermanent nature of things all act as fuel. We've seen how these habitual patterns create suffering, even when life itself has presented only a minor discomfort. The crucial realization, then, is that the fire of suffering does not burn by itself. It requires constant tending, constant fueling. And if we are the ones who have been adding the fuel, then we also hold the power to stop. The ending of suffering is not about finding some magical external solution, but about ceasing the internal actions that perpetuate it. Think of a campfire. The logs, the dry leaves, the kindling, these are the immediate causes for the fire. But if you stop adding to it, if you let the existing fuel burn itself out, the fire will naturally subside. It will not rage forever. Our suffering is the same. The initial spark of pain or discomfort might be unavoidable, but the sustained burn, the consuming flames of misery, are a result of our continued engagement with it, our refusal to let the initial experience simply pass. This is the ultimate teaching. The capacity for an end to suffering lies within us, not outside of us. It's in the conscious decision to stop feeding the flame. This means recognizing when we are reacting with anger and choosing instead a moment of pause. It means noticing a craving and consciously refraining from chasing it mindlessly. It means observing an aversion and gently softening our resistance to what is. It means understanding that our thoughts are not our enemies, but if we constantly engage with them, believing them and acting upon them as if they were absolute truths, they become the kindling for our internal blaze. Letting them arise and pass without identifying with them, without adding our own commentary and judgment, allows them to burn out naturally. The peace that comes from stopping the feeding of the flame is not a state of passive emptiness, but a profound quietude, a settledness that arises from no longer engaging in the exhausting war against reality. It is the profound stillness that reveals what remains when all the struggle finally ceases. And this cessation isn't an end to experience, but a transformation of our relationship to it. The journey has been about deconstructing our ingrained habits of suffering, and in doing so, discovering the innate capacity for peace that resides within us. It's a path of practice, of consistent and gentle redirection, of choosing awareness over reaction, and of understanding that the most potent form of freedom is the freedom from our own self-created torment. And this freedom is always available, accessible the moment we choose to stop adding fuel to the fire. Make sure to subscribe for more Buddhist wisdom and hit that notification bell so you never miss the next teaching. Until then, stay present, stay peaceful, and we'll see you in the next one.